My name is Richard, and that fateful evening began like any other, a promise of a pleasant night out with my beloved wife, Catherine. We had chosen La Belle Époque, a charming restaurant renowned for its artful cuisine, elegant decor, and attentive service. It was a place where refined conversation mingled with the soft strains of live jazz, where every detail whispered sophistication and care. I had just returned from an important lecture series, a day in which I had broadened my mind and discovered a renewed passion for learning, and I felt inspired, thinking that knowledge would strengthen the bond between us. Catherine and I had been married for nearly a decade, our lives intertwined through shared dreams and silent understandings. On this particular evening, I expected nothing more than to celebrate our routine, a dinner that marked another chapter in our seemingly stable relationship. However, unbeknownst to me, subtle shifts were already at work, setting the stage for an unfolding betrayal that would shatter the facade of our peaceful existence. As we entered the restaurant, the soft lighting and gentle hum of conversation created an almost hypnotic atmosphere. I remembered how Catherine's eyes used to light up at the sight of a new book or an intriguing idea, and tonight her gaze, though warm, seemed to harbor a flicker of restlessness. We were led to a secluded table near a window draped in lace curtains, affording us a view of the bustling street beyond. I took a moment to appreciate the artistry of the space, polished wooden surfaces, gleaming silverware, and floral arrangements that exuded both beauty and a hint of nostalgia. Our waiter that evening was a young man named Daniel. His professionalism was impeccable, his uniform crisp, his manners refined, and his smile polite yet engaging. In the first few minutes of our meal, I noticed how Daniel's attentive presence seemed to focus a bit too much on Catherine. His subtle glances in her direction, his softly spoken compliments on her elegance, and the way he lingered when taking our order all struck me as unusual. I tried to attribute these observations to the restaurant's commitment to excellence, but a small seed of unease took root in my mind. As dinner progressed, I found myself increasingly absorbed in our conversation. I recounted details of my lecture, sharing the new ideas that had sparked my excitement, while Catherine listened with a smile that sometimes faltered ever so slightly. There were moments when her eyes wandered toward the entrance, and I caught fleeting glances between her and Daniel whenever he passed by our table with a fresh basket of bread or a refill of wine. I told myself that perhaps I was simply tired from the day's events, that my newly acquired knowledge was clouding my ability to appreciate the evening's gentle rhythms. Despite my internal distractions, I endeavored to enjoy our time together. The meal was exquisite, a symphony of flavors that ranged from delicate amuse-bouches to a main course that melted on the tongue. The soft glow of candlelight and the murmur of other diners created a cocoon of intimacy that should have reassured me of our unity. Yet, there was an undercurrent of tension that I could neither define nor dispel. I began to notice the subtle signals, a playful smile exchanged between Catherine and Daniel when he refilled our glasses, a quiet laugh that seemed a bit too intimate for the circumstances. At one point, as the violinist's melody swelled in the background, Catherine's hand brushed against Daniel's as he cleared a dish. The contact was brief, almost accidental, but it sent a jolt through my heart, urging me to look closer. My mind raced with conflicting emotions, confusion, suspicion, and a faint, rising dread that perhaps my world was about to change irrevocably. I tried to focus on the pleasant aspects of the evening, on the familiarity of Catherine's presence and the comforting routine of our shared life. Yet, as the courses continued to arrive, each plate more lavish than the last, the interplay between Catherine and Daniel grew more charged. Their exchanges, while hushed and discreet, seemed to speak of secrets hidden behind polite smiles. I observed Catherine's shifting posture, the way she seemed to lean in just a fraction too close when speaking to Daniel, her eyes softening with an unspoken sentiment that I had never witnessed before. As dessert was served, a decadent slice of chocolate torte crowned with a dollop of whipped cream, I felt the first real pang of betrayal stirring within me. I had spent the day immersed in the pursuit of knowledge, believing that understanding the world better would also deepen our connection. Instead, I now sensed that the evening was unraveling into a tableau of conflicting desires. The gentle cadence of the restaurant, which once felt like a balm for the soul, now echoed with a quiet forewarning. Leaving the table, I excused myself under the guise of a brief visit to the restroom. In that moment of solitude, my mind replayed every glance, every seemingly innocent touch between Catherine and Daniel. The intricate dance of their interactions painted a picture that my heart resisted, but my intuition demanded I acknowledge. Something was terribly amiss. As I washed my face and stared at my reflection, the realization dawned on me that this was the moment when I had woken up, when my heart had become educated to a truth I could no longer ignore. Returning to the table, I resolved to observe silently, to gather every fragment of evidence before confronting the situation head-on. My eyes roamed the room, catching glimpses of clandestine smiles and fleeting touches that defied the decorum of the evening. With each passing minute, my internal turmoil grew, mingling with the lingering remnants of the day's scholarly triumph and the impending collapse of trust. Little did I know that the seeds of betrayal had already taken deep root in the fertile ground of our marriage, and that by the end of the night, I would be forced to confront a painful reality, a betrayal orchestrated not in a moment of passion, but over the course of an evening at a restaurant, where every detail was magnified by my dawning awareness. In that delicate balance between love and deception, the stage was set for a revelation that would forever alter the course of my life. The night wore on, and as I returned to my seat, I found it increasingly difficult to ignore the subtle signals that had emerged earlier. Every glance from Catherine, every whispered exchange with Daniel, added layers to the intricate tapestry of suspicion forming in my mind. I could no longer dismiss these signs as mere coincidences or as products of my fatigued state. Instead, I began to piece together the quiet narrative that was unfolding right before me. Catherine seemed conflicted. Her expressions ranged from warmth to moments of furtive distraction. It was as if a part of her was present, but another part existed somewhere far away, engaged in a conversation with someone invisible to my eyes. My thoughts spiraled as I recalled our shared history, the laughter, the unspoken promises, the dreams we had nurtured together. How could all of that be tarnished by something so unexpected? Yet, the evidence was slowly accumulating. The soft hum of conversation around me began to blend into the backdrop of my internal struggle. Every time Daniel passed by our table, I fixated on the slight, almost imperceptible signals, a subtle tilt of Catherine's head, the way her eyes followed him as if searching for reassurance in his smile. I noted how, on more than one occasion, her hand brushed his as if by accident. Each of these seemingly insignificant details coalesced into a vivid tableau of betrayal that was becoming harder to ignore. I found myself mentally retracing the moments of the evening, the gentle clink of glasses, the muted tones of laughter, and the intermittent pauses that now carried an unsettling weight. I realized that my thirst for knowledge that day, which had led me to expand my mind, now felt tragically ironic. The lesson I was about to learn was one of heartbreak, a lesson that would shatter the illusion of our perfect union. I recalled the words of a professor who once said that knowledge, though a gift, could sometimes be a curse when it revealed truths we wished to remain hidden. Catherine's behavior, once so familiar and comforting, now struck me with an alien quality. As she spoke softly to Daniel in a corner of the restaurant, her laughter mingled with his in a way that made my skin crawl. I observed the tension in her posture, the slight withdrawal of her eyes when our gazes met across the table. It was as if, in that moment, she was living a double life, a secret life that I had been completely unaware of until now. In the midst of my internal battle, I struggled to maintain the appearance of a loving husband. I forced a smile, engaging in small talk with the guests around us, all the while my mind churned with the painful realization that the trust one had placed in Catherine was being eroded by every stolen glance and every whispered word. I felt a gnawing sense of isolation, as if I were the only one awake in a room full of people, aware of the hidden betrayal that threatened to consume everything I held dear. I began to notice how the ambience of the restaurant had subtly shifted for me. The soft lighting and carefully arranged decor, which once exuded romance, now seemed to conspire with my suspicions. Shadows lengthened in the corners of the room, mirroring the darkening corners of my thoughts. Every sound, the clatter of cutlery, the gentle murmur of conversations, became a reminder that life continued in its delicate balance, even as my own world teetered on the brink of collapse. As the courses continued to arrive, I felt increasingly torn between confrontation and silent observation. My heart yearned to demand answers, yet a part of me hesitated, fearful that the truth might be even more painful than the hints that had led me here. I began to record the moments in my mind, each detail etched like an indelible mark, a testament to the slow, creeping realization that the woman I loved was living a deception that I could no longer ignore. At one point during a lull in the service, I caught Catherine glancing over her shoulder, her eyes flickering with a mix of guilt and defiance. It was as if she knew I was aware, that she sensed the transformation in my demeanor, a transformation from a man who trusted implicitly to one who was beginning to see the cracks in the facade of our life together. In that silent exchange, the distance between us grew insurmountable, and the truth began to crystallize in my mind with painful clarity. I recalled every small detail, the way her voice softened when addressing Daniel, the subtle movement of her fingers as she brushed a stray lock of hair away from her face. Each detail was a piece of a puzzle that I was forced to assemble in the dim light of that fateful evening. The reality was slowly dawning on me. The betrayal was not an isolated incident, but a culmination of quiet moments that had added up over time. In the process, my own feelings of inadequacy and sorrow began to mix with the sting of betrayal, creating a storm of emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. In that fragile space between hope and despair, I resolved that the truth could no longer be kept at bay. The night was nearing its end, and with every passing moment, the distance between who I thought Catherine was and the person I was witnessing grew wider. I prepared myself for the inevitable confrontation, knowing that the painful enlightenment I had received today was only the beginning of a journey that would test my strength and reshape my understanding of love and trust. The restaurant's ambient murmur had now transformed into a haunting silence within my heart. As the final course was served, a delicate ensemble of flavors that could no longer mask the bitterness in my soul, I knew that the time had come to face the truth. With trembling resolve, I beckoned Catherine to join me in a quiet corner of the establishment, a secluded space away from the watchful eyes of the other diners and the ever-attentive Daniel. Seated in the dim light, the tension between us was palpable. I looked into Catherine's eyes, searching for the warmth and honesty that had once been the cornerstone of our relationship. Instead, I saw conflict, regret, and an unspoken sorrow. "Catherine," I began in a voice that was steadier than I felt. "Tonight, something has changed. I've seen things, small moments that now add up to a painful truth. I need you to be honest with me." Her eyes flickered with surprise and fear, and for a moment, silence reigned. The soft strains of jazz from the restaurant speakers seemed to underscore the gravity of our exchange. "Richard," she whispered, her voice quivering, I never meant for you to find out like this." The admission hung between us, fragile and laden with regret. I recalled every detail, the lingering smiles, the gentle touches, the secretive glances exchanged with Daniel. My heart pounded with the force of betrayal, and though my voice was calm, each word was edged with sorrow. "Then tell me, Catherine, how long has this been going on? How long have I been a fool to believe in our promises when you were deceiving me?" Tears welled in her eyes as she struggled to speak. "It started as a harmless flirtation," she confessed, her voice barely audible over the quiet hum of the restaurant. "But it quickly escalated. I was lonely, confused, and Daniel was there, offering the attention I felt I was missing. Every word was a dagger, each revelation slicing through the remnants of trust that had once bound us together. I felt a whirlwind of emotions, rage, sorrow, disbelief, all colliding into one overwhelming sensation. The very foundation of our marriage was crumbling before my eyes, and I found myself grappling with the painful realization that the love I had cherished had been tainted by betrayal. "I educated myself today, Catherine," I said slowly. "I learned that love is not enough if trust is broken. I cannot pretend that I am blind to what I have seen." Her tearful eyes pleaded for forgiveness, for an explanation that could justify the inexcusable. But there was no excuse that could mend the broken pieces of my heart. The conversation turned to desperate attempts at rationalization, whispered explanations of loneliness, misguided flirtation, and the allure of forbidden attention, but none of it made sense in the face of the evidence laid bare by the night's events. In that secluded corner of La Belle Époque, the air was thick with regret and sorrow. Every word we exchanged deepened the chasm between us, and the realization struck me with relentless force. The woman I loved had chosen a path that would forever alter the course of our lives. "I trusted you," I said, my voice raw with emotion. "I believed in our future, in the promises we made. But tonight, I see that those promises were nothing more than fragile illusions." For a long moment, all that remained was the sound of our breathing and the distant murmur of the restaurant. I realized that this confrontation was not just about the betrayal itself, but about reclaiming my own dignity, about accepting that the life I once knew was irreparably changed. With every word that left my lips, the facade of our perfect life crumbled further, leaving behind a painful but necessary truth. Catherine reached out as if to bridge the gap between us, her hand trembling in mine. But I withdrew, unable to bear the touch that now felt like a reminder of what had been lost. "I need time," I said, my voice resolute yet aching. "Time to understand, time to heal. I cannot continue living in a lie, nor can I pretend that this betrayal is something that can be easily forgiven." The night ended with us parting ways, Catherine's figure dissolving into the darkened corridor of the restaurant, and me left to wander through a labyrinth of shattered dreams and unanswerable questions. As I stepped out into the cool night air, I felt the weight of the truth settle on my shoulders. I was no longer the oblivious husband who had entered La Belle Époque that evening. I was a man awakened by painful knowledge, forever changed by the discovery of betrayal. In the days following that harrowing evening, I found myself adrift in a sea of conflicting emotions. The discovery of Catherine's betrayal with Daniel had not only shattered my trust, but had also forced me to confront deep-seated questions about who I was and what I deserved in life. Every memory of that night replayed in my mind, a montage of soft music, whispered secrets, and the painful realization that love, once believed to be eternal, could be so heartbreakingly fragile. The morning light brought little solace. I wandered through the quiet streets, my thoughts heavy with grief and anger. The restaurant, La Belle Époque, had once been a sanctuary of refined elegance and promise. Now it stood as a monument to the cruelty of fate, a place where every detail of that night was etched into my soul. I began to understand that the pain of betrayal was not just an emotional wound, but a catalyst for profound self-reflection. In the solitude of those early hours, I resolved to reclaim my identity, to use the sting of betrayal as a stepping stone toward personal growth. Therapy and quiet introspection became my companions in the following weeks. I revisited the lessons of my earlier day of education, a day that had broadened my mind in unexpected ways, and realized that true wisdom lay not only in the pursuit of knowledge but in the acceptance of life's harsh truths. I discovered that forgiveness, though elusive, was not about forgetting the past, but about freeing myself from its suffocating grip. The journey was painful, marked by moments of despair and sudden flashes of clarity, yet each step forward was a tribute to the resilience of the human spirit. I sought solace in literature, music, and long, solitary walks in nature, where the quiet rustle of leaves and the gentle murmur of a flowing stream reminded me that life, despite its betrayals, continued to offer beauty and renewal. In those moments of quiet introspection, I began to see that the man I once was, the man who believed in the sanctity of promises, was capable of emerging stronger from the ashes of heartbreak. I learned to cherish my own worth and to recognize that betrayal, as painful as it was, did not define me. Catherine's absence was a constant presence, a ghost that haunted my thoughts. I grappled with conflicting emotions, anger at the betrayal, sorrow for what was lost, and a reluctant empathy for the complexities of human desire that had driven her to seek solace in the arms of another. Over time, I came to understand that while her choices had irrevocably altered our lives, they were also a mirror reflecting my own vulnerabilities and the silent cracks in our shared history. It was a painful lesson. Trust, once shattered, can only be rebuilt through honesty, time, and a deep commitment to understanding oneself. In therapy sessions, I learned to articulate my pain, to convert the raw anguish of betrayal into words that carried the seeds of healing. I began writing, a journal chronicling not only the betrayal, but also the gradual rebirth of a man who refused to be defined by the past. Each entry was a small act of defiance against the bitterness that threatened to engulf me. Each word was a step toward rediscovering the value of my own spirit. As months passed, the intensity of my grief softened into a quiet acceptance. The wound of that night never fully healed, but it transformed into a scar, a reminder of the lessons learned and the resilience forged in the crucible of betrayal. I discovered that the path to renewal was not linear. It was marked by setbacks, small victories, and the occasional surge of painful memories. Yet, with every sunrise, I found a renewed sense of purpose, a commitment to live authentically and to honor the truth that had been revealed on that unforgettable night. I began to rebuild my life piece by piece, embracing a future that was uncertain but also filled with the promise of growth. I reconnected with old friends, engaged in pursuits that brought me joy, and learned to value solitude as a time for reflection rather than isolation. In time, the bitterness of betrayal gave way to a quiet optimism, a belief that even the deepest wounds could give rise to new beginnings. Now, as I stand at the threshold of a new chapter in my life, I look back on that fateful evening with a mixture of sorrow and gratitude. The pain of betrayal, though harrowing, taught me that love must be rooted in mutual respect and unwavering honesty. It reminded me that true education is not merely the accumulation of knowledge, but the willingness to face life's harsh realities with courage and integrity. Though Catherine's actions changed our lives forever, They also ignited in me a determination to forge a path defined by truth and self-respect. In the end, the journey through betrayal was a journey toward understanding, not just of the woman I had lost, but of the man I was meant to become. And as I continue to walk this winding road, I carry with me the hard-won lessons of that night, the resilience that emerged from shattered trust, and the unwavering hope that, even in the face of heartbreak, the human spirit can find its way back to light.